At 27, I was given an old, run-down house, and my sister a brand new apartment. Enjoy my new story.
My mother called me on a Tuesday evening and told me I had 17 hours to get out of my own house. The house I rebuilt with my own two hands, my own savings, and roughly 400 splinters, I still haven't gotten out of my palms. She said my sister needed it more. She said I was being selfish. She gave me until noon the next day, like I was checking out of a hotel and not standing in the kitchen. I tiled myself at 2 in the morning on a work night. But I need to start from the beginning, because you need to understand what I was given and what my sister got instead. My name is Gabriella Cobb. I'm 27 years old and I work as a fleet coordinator for a regional trucking company in Evansville, Indiana. I make $41,600 a year before taxes. I drive a 2011 Chevy Malibu with 147,000 miles on it and a passenger window that only goes down halfway. And until about 2 years ago, I thought my mother loved me and my sister equally. I was wrong about the window, too. It doesn't go down at all anymore. My father, Glenn Cobb, was a maintenance supervisor at a grain elevator out in Newburgh. Big hands, quiet voice, the kind of man who could fix a leaking pipe, a broken screen door, and your bad mood all before breakfast. I was his shadow from the time I was 6. I held flashlights. I handed him wrenches. I learned that if something's broken, you don't stare at it and cry. You figure out what's wrong and you fix it. That was Glenn Cobb's whole philosophy, and honestly, it's a pretty good one for most things in life. He died 8 years ago. Heart attack at 51. No warning, no buildup. Just there one morning, making scrambled eggs and gone by lunch. He didn't leave a will, either. He was 51. He figured he had time. Under Indiana law, when there's no will, everything goes to the surviving spouse. So everything went to my mother, Rhonda. My sister Delaney is 3 years older than me. She's 30 and works as a social media coordinator for a boutique hotel chain, which means she takes photographs of poolside cocktails and writes captions with words like aesthetic and curated vibes. She makes decent money, but she spends better money. Delaney was always my mother's favorite, and I don't say that with bitterness. I say it because it's a fact, like gravity or the cost of gas. Rhonda and Delaney talked every day. Rhonda worried about Delaney. Rhonda planned for Delaney. And I think the reason is simple. Delaney needed her. Delaney called when things were hard, leaned in when things were scary, asked for help with everything from taxes to tire pressure. And Rhonda mistook that neediness for closeness. I never called. I just handled things. And Rhonda mistook that silence for not caring. 2 years ago, Rhonda sold the family home in Newburgh, the house I grew up in, the house where my dad built the deck, and I helped him stain it the summer I was 12. She told both of us she got $189,000 for it. She used that money, plus her savings, to set up Delaney's future. I didn't see a dime, but I didn't ask either, because I thought there was nothing left. Turns out I was wrong about that too, but we'll get there. On my 27th birthday, my mother hosted dinner at her apartment and announced she was giving us both gifts. Delaney got a brand new condo in downtown Evansville. 2 bedrooms, river view, granite countertops, a walk-in closet big enough to hold every pair of shoes she'd ever bought, and probably a few she hadn't yet. $215,000. Delaney was already showing everyone the listing on her phone, swiping through photos, picking out furniture before dessert was served. I got a manila envelope. Inside was a deed to a house in Boonville, about 20 minutes west of Evansville. My father had inherited it from his uncle years ago. It was a 1,400 square foot bungalow built in 1947 with a sagging front porch, a cracked foundation on the east side, knob and tube wiring that probably violated 6 different codes, and a roof that leaked in 4 places. The county had it assessed at $43,500. The whole place smelled like mildew and something I sincerely hoped was not a dead animal. Spoiler, it was a live one. But more on that later. Rhonda smiled at me across the table and said, "Delaney needs stability. You're resourceful, Gabby. You always figure things out." Translation: I gave the good gift to the daughter I worry about, and the leftover to the one I take for granted. Delaney looked up from her phone just long enough to say, "At least you won't have to pay rent on your little project." The table laughed. I didn't. I signed the deed transfer paperwork that night at Rhonda's kitchen table. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. Getting that house was like receiving a participation trophy, except the trophy was on fire and full of raccoons. But it was mine. My name on a piece of paper filed at the Warwick County Recorder's office. The next morning, I drove out to Boonville and stood in front of that house. Vines were crawling up the siding, like the place was being slowly eaten by nature. Something was scratching inside the attic. The porch steps creaked like they were filing a complaint. But I stood there and I thought, this is mine. It's ugly. It's broken. But nobody can take it from me. I was wrong about that last part, but that's getting ahead of the story. Before we continue, please hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one. Thank you so much for being here. It really means the world. Now, let me tell you about my first night in the Boonville house because it was something special. It was October in Indiana, which means it's 46 degrees at night and your breath fogs up inside your own bedroom. The heating system was dead. Not broken, dead. The kind of dead where a repairman looks at it, makes a face like he just found out his dog ran away and says, "Ma'am, this unit is from 1983. The kitchen faucet ran rust-colored water for a solid 3 minutes before it finally went clear, and I stood there watching it like I was panning for gold in my own sink. And then I heard the scratching from the attic. Slow, deliberate, like someone dragging furniture across the floor, except nobody lived in my attic. Well, nobody human. I grabbed a flashlight, pulled down the attic ladder, poked my head up, and made direct eye contact with the fattest raccoon I have ever seen in my life. He looked at me like I was the intruder, like he had a lease. I named him Gerald on the spot because he had the energy of a man who'd been retired for 15 years and did not appreciate visitors. Gerald became my first roommate in that house. He didn't pay rent, but honestly, he was more reliable than most people I knew. Here's the thing about starting with $14,200 in savings in a house that needs everything. You can't panic. You make a spreadsheet. I know that doesn't sound exciting, but I'm telling you, that spreadsheet saved my life. Every dollar tracked, every receipt saved. I couldn't afford contractors, so I became the contractor. YouTube University, class of right now. I watched tutorials on tiling, drywall patching, basic plumbing, electrical. I already had the basics from all those years holding flashlights for my dad. I still remembered him saying, "Gabby, if you can read a wire diagram, you can fix almost anything in a house." Turns out, he was right. And that skill alone probably saved me $8,000. I worked my fleet coordinator job Monday through Friday, 7 to 4. Every evening and every weekend. Renovation. I sourced salvage materials from the Habitat for Humanity Restore in Evansville. Clearance tile from a Lowe's in Henderson, Kentucky, just across the river. They had a discontinued line of Subway tile for 60 cents a square foot, and I bought every box they had. That's the kind of savings that adds up to a functioning bathroom. $312 for the tile, $87 for cabinet hardware, $1,400 for a reconditioned water heater I found through a guy Walt knew. But I'm getting ahead of myself with Walt. I tore out the old carpet in the living room during my 3rd week, expecting the worst. Instead, I found original 1947 oak hardwood floors underneath. Scratched, dusty, hidden under 40 years of ugly carpet and carpet pad, but solid, real oak, the kind of wood they don't even use anymore because it's too expensive. I sanded those floors on my hands and knees over the course of 3 weekends, and when I put the first coat of polyurethane down, they glowed like honey. That was my first real victory in that house. And I'm not ashamed to say I sat on the floor and talked to it like a crazy person. There you are. I knew you were under there. Now, Walt Oleski, 74 years old, retired electrician. Lived in the house next door for 31 years, built like a fire hydrant and just as welcoming. My second Saturday in the house, 7:15 in the morning, I'm running a circular saw on the front porch, and this man appears out of nowhere in a bathrobe and slippers, banging on my chain link fence like I'd personally offended him. He thought I was a flipper. One of those people who guts a house in 2 weeks with the cheapest materials possible and sells it to some couple from Louisville for 3 times what it's worth. Last thing this street needs, he said, is another weekend warrior. I told him I wasn't flipping anything, that I lived here, that this was my house, and I was fixing it because it needed fixing. He looked at me like I'd told him I was training for the Olympics. Then he walked back inside without another word. Month 6. Delaney made her first and only visit. Walked through my construction zone in white sneakers on a job site which tells you everything, took photographs of the exposed studs and the torn-up kitchen, and posted them in the family group chat with 3 crying, laughing emojis. Caption, Gabby's dream home. My mother responded, "Oh, honey," with a sad face emoji. 47 relatives saw that thread. Not one of them asked if I needed help. Meanwhile, Rhonda co-signed Delaney's new car lease, $480 a month for a Lexus NX. Delaney posted it on Instagram with the caption, "Blessed." I was replacing a toilet flange with a $7 part, and a YouTube video paused at the 3-minute mark. But here's where things turned. Month 4, Walt Oleski caught me rewiring a junction box in the garage. I didn't know he was watching. I was focused. Proper wire nuts, clean runs, everything grounded the way my dad taught me. Walt stood there for a full minute. The next morning, he knocked on my door with a 6-pack of Ale 81. That's a ginger soda from Kentucky, if you've never had it. It tastes like someone made ginger ale actually care about its job, and told me he'd redo my electrical panel. Didn't ask, didn't negotiate, just showed up Saturday at 7 a.m. sharp. The exact same time he'd complained about the noise. Walt didn't talk much while we worked, but one afternoon he mentioned he had a daughter in Oregon who never called. He said it once and never brought it up again. I didn't push. I just handed him wrenches and held the flashlight, the way I used to do with my dad. Some things don't need words. By month 8, the outside of that house was transformed. New siding I installed myself with Walt's help. Repaired porch with pressure-treated lumber. Shutters painted a deep blue-gray that made the whole place look like it belonged in a magazine. Neighbors started slowing their cars down when they drove past. Month 12, Delaney's HOA dropped a $3,800 special assessment on every unit in her building. Roof damage, major repairs needed. Delaney called Rhonda in a panic. Rhonda wrote the check that same afternoon, $3,800. That's more than double what I spent on my entire bathroom renovation. But who's counting? I am. I'm counting. Gerald the raccoon finally vacated the attic around month 5, after I installed proper soffit vents and sealed every gap I could find. I considered mailing him a formal eviction notice just for the satisfaction, but I figured he'd gotten the message. By month 14, I'd spent $38,000. I took out a $20,000 personal loan. The interest wasn't great, but it was manageable on my salary if I kept my overtime hours. I was all in. There was no backup plan, no safety net. Either this house became what I could see in my head, or I was broke and living in an expensive construction site. I chose to bet on myself. My dad would have done the same thing. 18 months. That's how long it took to turn a $43,000 wreck into something that made people stop their cars. The house was unrecognizable, and I don't mean freshened up, I mean transformed. The craftsman-style charm that had been buried under decades of neglect was fully restored. Open-concept kitchen with butcher block counters I built myself from reclaimed bowling alley lanes I found on Facebook Marketplace. A guy in Tell City was tearing down an old recreation center and selling the maple in sections for $400. I drove down with a rented trailer and hauled 4 slabs back to Boonville, cut them, sanded them, sealed them. Those countertops looked like something out of a design magazine, and they cost me less than what Delaney paid for a single bar stool in her condo. The original oak hardwood floors, the ones I found under that carpet, were glowing with 3 coats of polyurethane. The bathroom had the discontinued subway tile from Henderson, a new vanity I assembled from a flat pack, and a rainfall showerhead that made the whole room feel like a spa. I built raised garden beds out back. Tomatoes, basil, rosemary, marigolds along the edges to keep the bugs away. My dad taught me that trick when I was 10, and I'll tell you, it works better than any spray you can buy. New roof, proper HVAC, a two-zone system. Walt helped me spec out so I wasn't heating the whole house when I only needed the bedroom warm. Rewired top to bottom, every outlet grounded, every circuit labeled. That was Walt's masterwork, and he was proud of it. Total investment, $61,400. My original savings of $14,200, the $20,000 loan, and every single overtime dollar I earned for 18 months. I ate rice and beans 4 nights a week. I didn't buy new clothes for a year. My one luxury was a $12 bottle of wine on Friday nights. And honestly, that bottle was doing the work of a therapist. Cheaper, too, and it never asked me how I felt about my mother. A writer from the Warwick County Gazette reached out. A neighbor had mentioned the renovation, and the paper was doing a series on local homeowners. She came out, took 3 photos, and wrote a small human interest piece. Young woman transforms forgotten bungalow into Boonville gem. There I was on the front porch I rebuilt, smiling in work boots, looking like someone who hadn't slept a full 8 hours in a year and a half. Because I hadn't. Then the county reassessment notice came in the mail. I opened it standing at the kitchen counter, the one I built, and read the number twice. New assessed value, $298,000. Comparable homes on the street were selling between $285,000 and $310,000. My $43,000 ruin was now worth nearly $300,000. I sat on my porch steps and cried for the first time in 18 months. Not from sadness, not from exhaustion, from something that felt like my dad putting his hand on my shoulder and saying, "See? I told you. You just figure out what's wrong and you fix it." And then my mother called. Her voice was pleasant, which is how you know something's wrong with Rhonda. When she's genuinely happy for you, she's loud and messy and talks over you. When she's pleasant, she's calculating. Her first words weren't congratulations. They were questions. How much is it really worth now? Did the county actually reassess it? Is that before or after the loan? And then, dropped in, casually, like she was mentioning the weather, "You know, that house was always meant to stay in the family." That sentence hung in the air like smoke from something burning. I changed the subject. She let me, but I felt it. Something shifting under the surface. 3 days later, my cousin Tessa called. Tessa is the daughter of my dad's brother. Quiet, keeps to herself, works as a veterinary tech in Jasper. She was nervous on the phone, said she'd been at a family barbecue the past weekend, one I wasn't invited to, which told me everything about who organized it. Tessa had been in the kitchen getting ice when she overheard my mother and Delaney talking in the hallway. My mother's exact words, as Tessa relayed them, "I gave Gabriella the dump because I thought she'd quit and sell the lot back to me for $20,000. I never expected her to actually fix it. That house should have been Delaney's all along. I need to fix this." My stomach dropped. But right alongside the dread came clarity. Cold, clean, like stepping outside on a January morning. I knew my mother. Rhonda doesn't make idle comments. When Rhonda says, "I need to fix this," it means she's already working on it. The next day, I drove to Evansville and paid $350 for a consultation with a real estate attorney named Peggy Hartsock. Peggy was in her early 60s, reading glasses on a beaded chain, a desk covered in color-coded folders, and a handshake that could crack a walnut. She reviewed the deed. It was clean, recorded at the Warwick County Recorder's Office, dated March of the previous year. Gabriella Cobb, sole owner. Rhonda Cobb had signed the transfer herself in front of a notary public. Peggy looked at me over those reading glasses and said, "Your mother signed a voluntary deed transfer. She cannot reverse it. She'd need to prove fraud, coercion, or mental incapacity, and none of that applies here. But I know the type. If she tries something, save everything. Texts, voicemails, emails. Build a paper trail so thick she can't argue with it." That night, I created a folder on my laptop and named it Insurance. I started screenshotting every text my mother had sent me. Every voicemail got saved and backed up to the cloud. And because Peggy told me to be thorough, I pulled up the public property records for the Newberg house, the family home Rhonda sold 2 years ago. And that's when I found it. The Warwick County Recorder's Office showed the sale price of that house, not $189,000 like Rhonda told us. $247,000. She pocketed $58,000 and never said a single word. Not to me, not to Delaney, not to anyone. I stared at that screen for a long time. Then I took a screenshot, saved it to the folder, and closed the laptop. I didn't confront her, not yet. That was a card I'd hold until I needed it. The next day, Walt helped me mount 4 security cameras: front door, back door, driveway, side yard, cloud storage. Total cost, $189 from Amazon, which I thought was a funny number given the circumstances. I set them up, tested every angle, and made sure the night vision worked. Walt didn't ask why. He'd been watching the Cobb family drama unfold from 30 feet away for months. He knew a storm when he saw one coming. Delaney's life, meanwhile, was getting louder in all the wrong ways. She was behind on her HOA dues. There was a parking dispute with a neighbor about assigned spots. The Lexus payment plus insurance plus the HOA plus that $3,800 special assessment. Her dream condo was bleeding her dry. She started making comments to friends about my house. Must be nice to have a free house handed to you. The irony was so thick you could spread it on toast. You know, Gerald the raccoon was more honest than anyone in my family. At least when Gerald wanted something, he just took it and didn't pretend he was doing you a favor. 3 months passed after Tessa's call. Rhonda went quiet. No calls, no texts, no check-ins. To most people, silence from your mother might feel like peace. To me, it felt like the pressure dropping right before a storm rolls in. Month 22. A Tuesday evening, 7 p.m. sharp. I know the exact time because I looked at my phone when it rang, and the number burned into my memory like a brand. I was on the back deck, the last project I'd done. The one I saved for last because it was my favorite, staining the cedar planks a warm amber, watching the wood drink it up in the late summer light. It was peaceful. It was mine. And then my mother's name lit up my screen. Rhonda didn't start with hello. She didn't ask how I was. She started with a decision that had apparently already been made without me. We've talked about it, and Delaney needs the Boonville house. The condo isn't working out. The fees, the neighbors, it's all a nightmare. So here's what's going to happen. You'll take the condo, Delaney takes the house. It's fair, Gabriella. I gave you a wreck. You did a great job fixing it up. But now it's time to think about the family. I let the silence sit for 3 seconds. Then I asked one question. And if I say no? Her voice dropped about 10 degrees. You have 17 hours. We're coming tomorrow at noon with movers. Delaney's already packing boxes. Don't make this ugly. Don't be selfish. She hung up before I could respond, which was a classic Rhonda move. Deliver the verdict and leave the room so there's no appeal. I set the phone down on the deck railing, looked out at the yard. The raised beds were producing the last tomatoes of the season. The marigolds were still going strong. Somewhere down the street, a kid was riding a bike, and the chain was clicking in that lazy summer rhythm. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat on the deck I built with my own hands and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not fear, not shock, but certainty, like a lock clicking into place. I'd been waiting for this call ever since Tessa warned me 3 months ago. The only surprise was that it took Rhonda this long. I picked up the phone and called Peggy Hartsock. She answered on the second ring. I think she'd been half expecting this call, too. She drafted a cease and desist letter and emailed it to both Rhonda and Delaney within 90 minutes. She also told me she'd call Rhonda's phone directly if they showed up. Her fee for the evening, $200. Best $200 I ever spent. And I include the water heater in that ranking. Next call, Warwick County Sheriff's non-emergency line. I explained the situation calmly. My mother and sister were threatening to come to my property the following day with movers to forcibly take possession. I wanted it on record. The dispatcher was professional, took the details, and told me if I called the next day, a deputy would be dispatched. I thanked her, wrote down the case reference number, and hung up. Then I checked my security cameras. All 4 online. Cloud backup active, battery backup charged. Those cameras had been recording for 3 months with nothing more exciting than a stray cat and Walt checking his mailbox in his bathrobe. Tomorrow they'd earn their $189. I texted Walt. My mother and sister are coming tomorrow to try to take the house. I won't be here, but the cameras will be on. His reply came 2 minutes later. 4 words. I'll be on my porch. That night, I organized the insurance folder one final time. The deed. 247 receipts totaling $61,400. 18 months of text messages. Rhonda's voicemail from that evening. Saved and backed up. The Gazette article. Peggy's. Cease and desist. And the piece I'd been holding like an ace up my sleeve. The Warwick County Public Record showing the Newburgh house sold for $247,000, not $189. My plan was simple. I would not be at the house when they arrived. I'd be at Walt's, 30 feet away, watching through the camera app on my phone. Peggy would handle legal communication by phone. I wouldn't give my mother the confrontation she wanted. No shouting match on the lawn, no tears she could twist into, see how emotional she is. No chance for Rhonda to play the victim in front of an audience. Just a locked door, a lawyer's voice, and 4 cameras recording everything. That night, Rhonda sent a group text to the extended family. Gabriella is refusing to help her sister. She's being selfish with family property. After everything I've done for this family, this is what I get. Phones lit up across the Cobb family tree. A couple of cousins responded with sympathy for Rhonda. An uncle said, "Family has to stick together." Aunt Nora, my dad's sister, stayed completely silent, which from Nora was louder than anything anyone else said. I didn't respond to a single message. I just screenshotted every one and saved them to the folder. I set my alarm for 6 a.m., then packed a bag, laptop, phone charger, the insurance folder on a flash drive. I also put on my best flannel shirt and my cleanest pair of work jeans. I figured if I was going to war, I might as well look like I chose to be here. I thought about packing Gerald's old water dish for good luck, then reminded myself I'm a 27-year-old woman with a real estate attorney, not a superstitious raccoon lady. Close call, though. Morning of. I made coffee in my kitchen. The kitchen I tiled, the counters I built, the faucet that hadn't run rust in over a year. Then at 10:30, I walked next door to Walt's, brought the coffee. Walt provided the kitchen chairs and a clear view of Hickory Lane through his front window. We sat. We waited. At 11:48 a.m., a white budget rental truck turned onto Hickory Lane, followed by my mother's silver Buick Encore. My heart rate didn't even change. I was ready. The truck parked in front of my house. Rhonda's Buick pulled in right behind it, close enough that she almost kissed the bumper. She's never been a great parker, and stress wasn't helping. Delaney stepped out of the passenger side of the truck. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and a linen blazer, which is what you wear when you think you're directing a moving day and not committing a crime. 2 guys climbed out of the cab, mid-20s, jeans and work boots, the kind of guys you find on Craigslist under moving help, $100 each, cash only. Rhonda had told them she was helping her daughter move into a family home, a normal job. They had no idea what they'd driven into. Rhonda got out of the Buick already on the phone, performing for whoever was listening. Yes, we're here now, we're handling it. She always did that, narrated her own life like she was the hero in a movie, only she was watching. Delaney walked up to the front door, tried the handle, locked. Rang the doorbell, knocked, nothing. The house stared back at her with 4 camera lenses and absolute silence. I was sitting at Walt's kitchen table, 30 feet away, phone flat on the table, camera app open, all 4 feeds visible. I could see Delaney's confusion perfectly, the way she stepped back from the door and looked at the windows like maybe I was hiding behind the curtains. I wasn't. I was drinking coffee and watching her figure out that this wasn't going to be what Rhonda promised. Rhonda marched up to the porch and started banging. Not knocking, banging. "Gabriella, open this door right now. Stop being dramatic." She said it loud enough that Walt raised an eyebrow from across his own kitchen. The woman was putting on a show for a street that wasn't watching, because at noon on a Wednesday in Boonville, most people are at work, like normal adults. Silence. More banging. Delaney tried calling my phone. I let it ring out. She tried again. Same thing. Then Rhonda's phone rang. An Evansville number she didn't recognize. I watched on camera as she frowned, then answered. Peggy Hartsock. And let me tell you, Peggy on the phone is something. Calm, precise. No warmth. No wasted syllables. She identified herself as my attorney. informed Rhonda that the property at this address is legally owned by Gabriella Cobb via a voluntary deed transfer, signed, notarized, and recorded at the Warwick County Recorder's Office by Rhonda Cobb herself, that a cease and desist had been emailed the prior evening, that any attempt to enter the property constitutes trespassing, that any attempt to remove items constitutes theft, that security cameras are recording all activity on the premises, and that the Warwick County Sheriff's Office has been notified of the situation. Rhonda exploded. I couldn't hear her exact words through the camera audio, but I could see her body, the rigid posture, the free hand chopping the air, the pacing. She was doing the thing she always does, getting louder because she thinks volume is the same as authority. At one point, I caught a fragment. "My house! I gave it to her." Peggy, from what she told me later, responded with one line. "Ma'am, a recorded deed is a legal transfer of ownership. You have no standing. I strongly advise you to leave before law enforcement arrives." Then Peggy hung up because Peggy doesn't argue. She states facts and moves on. Rhonda turned to Delaney. They argued on the driveway, arms going, voices sharp. Delaney was asking why Rhonda told her this would be simple. Rhonda was insisting they just needed to find a way in. One of the Craigslist guys cleared his throat and said what might be my favorite sentence of this entire story. "Ma'am, you told us this was your daughter's place and we were helping her move in. If there's a lawyer and cops involved, we're out." The other one was already walking back to the truck. They drove away in under 2 minutes, $200 in cash that Rhonda would never get back. Rhonda tried one more thing. She walked around the side of the house toward the back gate. Camera 3 caught her perfectly, pulling on the latch, pushing on the fence, trying to find a gap. The gate was locked with a padlock I'd installed in month 19, right after Tessa's warning. Walt, who had been watching from his own porch, stood up and said loud enough, "Ma'am, I'd think real careful about that if I were you." Rhonda looked at him, looked at the camera above the back door, then looked at Delaney, who was standing by the Buick now with her arms crossed, not angry anymore, just scared. You could see it in her posture. This had gone from easy swap to potential criminal charges in about 12 minutes, and even Delaney could do that math. Rhonda stormed back to the car, slammed the door hard enough that I heard it from Walt's kitchen. They sat there for almost 4 minutes. I watched the timestamp on the camera tick, and then pulled away. The budget truck was long gone. Hickory Lane went quiet again. Walt refilled my coffee. Neither of us said anything for a while. Then he raised his mug and said, "Your old man would have loved that." That evening, I sat down at my laptop and composed an email. I sent it to every member of the Cobb family I had an address for. 14 people. Subject line, the facts. No emotional language, no accusations, no, "How could you do this to me?" Just documents, the deed, the timeline, the receipts, all 247 of them, totaling $61,400, screenshots of every text Rhonda sent, including the ultimatum, the voicemail, and one attachment nobody expected, the Warwick County public record showing the Newburgh house, the family home, sold for $247,000, not the $189,000 Rhonda claimed. $58,000 unaccounted for. I learned from my father, you don't scream, you don't argue, you just lay out the work and let it speak for itself. That email was a grenade with a 14-person blast radius. Aunt Nora called me within 40 minutes. She's my dad's sister, 71, still sharp as a blade, lives outside Princeton, and doesn't tolerate nonsense from anyone. Her voice was steady, but I could hear something underneath it, something between sadness and anger. She said, "I always suspected Rhonda was difficult. I didn't know she was dishonest. Your father would be so proud of you, sweetheart." I held the phone tight and didn't trust myself to say much back. Over the next 2 days, 3 relatives who had supported Rhonda in the group chat sent me private messages. One uncle texted, "I had no idea about the money. I'm sorry I said what I said." A cousin in Louisville left a voicemail that was mostly just silence and then a quiet, "I should have asked your side first." The family group chat that Rhonda had weaponized went dead silent, like someone had pulled the plug on a machine. But here's the part I didn't expect. Delaney opened that email in her condo. the condo with the HOA problems and the river view she couldn't afford and the parking dispute that was still going, and she saw the Warwick County Public Record attachment, $247,000. She'd been told $189 her whole life. She sat there and did the math that I'd done weeks earlier, and she arrived at the same $58,000 hole. I learned what happened next through Tessa, who heard it from Aunt Nora. Delaney called Rhonda that night, asked one question: did the house really sell for $247,000? Rhonda's answer, silence. Then, after what Tessa described as a painfully long pause, "You don't understand how expensive it is to take care of this family." Delaney hung up. Through Tessa, I also learned the final piece, the one that made everything click into place. 2 weeks before that Tuesday phone call, before the 17-hour ultimatum, Rhonda had quietly consulted a real estate attorney in Evansville. Not Peggy, someone else. She'd asked about reversing a deed transfer. The attorney told her clearly, a voluntary, notarized, recorded transfer is final. She had zero legal standing. Rhonda walked out of that office knowing she couldn't win in court, and she called me anyway, because the law was never her tool. Pressure was. Guilt was. For 27 years, emotional manipulation had worked on me every single time. She was betting it would work once more. For the first time in my life, it didn't. Delaney's financial situation unraveled fast after that. She tried to list the condo. Her realtor ran comparables and came back with a market value of $194,000. She'd paid $215,000. Between the pending HOA assessment, the roof issues, and the overall building problems, no buyer was going above $195,000. She was $21,000 underwater on a gift that was supposed to set her up for life. She couldn't keep the Lexus lease. Couldn't keep up with the lifestyle Rhonda had built around her, like scaffolding that looked solid but had no foundation. She moved back in with Rhonda for 11 days. Then, after the phone call about the $58,000, she packed a bag and moved to a friend's spare room in Newburgh, the same town where our family home used to stand, the one Rhonda sold and lied about. There's a symmetry there that I didn't plan but couldn't ignore. Delaney didn't call me. I didn't call Delaney. We're not enemies, but we're not ready to be sisters yet either. She spent 30 years in a bubble Rhonda built, told she was the special one, given everything, shielded from every consequence. And when that bubble popped, it didn't just break her finances, it broke the story she'd been told about who she was and who our mother was. That takes time to rebuild. Maybe she will, maybe she won't. That's not my problem to fix. Rhonda's position by the end of month 23, no property, the $58,000 spent. Savings drained on Delaney's condo, Delaney's car, Delaney's life. Both daughters gone. Not because anyone punished her, because the truth came out and truth doesn't negotiate. She built a house of favoritism and lies, and it collapsed the same way my bungalow would have collapsed if I'd ignored the cracks instead of fixing them. 3 weeks after the confrontation, a warm Thursday evening, I was on the back deck, the same deck I was staining when Rhonda called with her ultimatum. The cedar had cured beautifully. The garden beds were winding down for the season, but the rosemary was still going strong. The house was lit up behind me. Every room, every fixture, every tile I'd placed, every board I'd nailed, every wire Walt had run through those walls. Mine. Walt came through the side gate carrying 2 glasses and a bottle of Maker's Mark. He sat down without asking, because after 22 months the man had earned permanent deck privileges. He poured 2 fingers each, handed me a glass, and raised his. "To Glenn," he said. "He'd have loved what you did with the place." I raised my glass. The bourbon was warm and the evening was quiet, and the house behind me was solid. Every square inch of it, built by hands that people underestimated. Some people hand you a ruin and call it a gift. The best thing you can do is prove them right. Thank you so much for staying with me all the way to the end. It means more than you know. I've got another story already waiting on your screen right now, and trust me, you're going to want to hear this one. Click it, and I'll see you there.